Hey Harvey, how are you?
Jimmy, how are you? Good.
I'm good. So, I want to talk a little bit. I did a couple of interviews already for this film, and I'm so impressed with the level of talent involved. How did you get involved, and what was your reaction to the script?
Well, I actually got involved because the director had a mutual friend of mine, and that friend texted me and said, "Hey, I'm talking to my friend. He's directing this new comedy. It's really great, and I think you should be a part of it. Can I put you guys in touch together?" And I said, "Sure. A friend of yours is a friend of mine." And we just got on the phone, and he sold me on it. He just sold me on the whole project and made it sound like he had a vision. He knows exactly what he wants, and this is what he lives and breathes. Like, this is his genre. So I
Mm.
felt very comfortable and very safe in his hands to come on board. And I guess the rest is history, because here we are.
Yeah, well, the thing about for some bizarre reason, I talked to Josh about this as well. Horror movies, especially werewolf movies, tend to work really well as comedy. And you've worked on a certain vampire show, which you had a part of. So you know that pretty well. What was the vibe on set? I mean, obviously horror can get there's a lot of fun. I think when doing a horror film. What was the vibe on set for you?
It was just fun. It was just every day was just going to play with an amazing ensemble. Like, this whole cast is uber talented. It's just like the stuff that was, you read the script and you already know or have an idea of what it's going to maybe look like or sound, but you have no idea until you get to set, and the choices that the actors make on the spot and what they bring and what the work that they've done on their own, that you have no idea until it's presented. Like, wow, that's even better than I even imagined. And that was the case with this project. It was, everyone was so great at what they were doing that you didn't want it to end. You were just like, I mean, literally, we became like a tight, small family. It was just like, it was incredible. We worked together and we lived together. We were living in cabins, and cooking dinner in the same kitchen every night and
Oh my
hanging out
gosh.
by the fireplace. So, I mean, it could have gone very south. And I think Josh did a very good job of casting people that I think he knew would blend well with each other, because all you need is, like, one bad apple, and, it's a horrible experience. But this was not that. Like, this was like, everyone was wonderful and lovely, and yeah, we could have shot for another 2 months. It's just like, that was the vibe.
Yeah, it sounds like really a communal experience, which is that's hard to find. You
It is.
know.
It is hard to find. I think that's so rare, and so when you take it, when you come across it, you take it. Just like, this is great, because we've all been on projects where, like, sometimes it's just people are in their own world. Like, it's like people, and so the chemistry is different and the vibe's different. You come up with this idea of, like, this is the energy I bring, and it's like, that's not the energy we accept here. You know what I mean? It could go either way. I've been fortunate enough to be, part of this ensemble and cast that's just so welcoming, loving, and other places that I visited as well, like, Zoe's, such a welcoming crew, and, magicians. Like, so I've been really lucky that I haven't had too many bad apples. So it's
That's a
been.
good thing. Well, speaking of chemistry, let's talk about you and Cheyenne. This is a just a fun pairing. You two are great together. Very believable. It's a lot of fun. What was that experience like working with him? And he's really funny in this. I
So
know
funny.
you can do funny, but come on.
He's so funny. And I think, from talking to Josh about, when he asked me, who do you want to play opposite of you as your partner? Because once I signed on to do the role, he talked to me and said, well, who do you want to play opposite? And I said, well, what are we looking for? We're looking for, charismatic. We're looking for charming. We're looking for funny. And he's like, yeah, all of that. And I was like, well, how about, like, Cheyenne Jackson? Never worked with him before. I've, known of his work for obviously years. And we were lucky enough to get him, and he was on board, and we met and we just hit it off. And he's a musical theater guy. I'm a musical theater guy, which was the ongoing joke. Was I went to school for musical theater, and I just barely got to practice that on Zoe's extraordinary playlist. And so I was like, we were just living off, stories, and there's a world of, dialogue that only, like, musical theater nerds know. And so it was just talking like that, and so we hit it off really well. And he's so funny, and we just bounced off each other so well that, I'm just, now glad to call him a friend.
That's amazing. I think that's one of the things is Josh did mention that you suggested Cheyenne. I just assumed you were buds, honestly, from what I saw on the screen and from what Josh told me.
Everyone assumes that. Everyone really, and that's credit to, working with an actor who's so giving and vulnerable and willing to be that open. I think us together is not the traditional queer couple that you see, and we wanted to make that point that human beings out there who happen to be queer don't necessarily fit the mold of what traditional Adonis or the gay culture is with six pack. And Cheyenne's very good looking, so he's obviously like a really tall, leading man, handsome guy. But the idea that love is, love, and it wouldn't have to necessarily look a certain way, so it was very important for us to portray that and to make it realistic. And you believe that these people, yeah, they're in a relationship. They are, they really are.
Well, that's something I think is also in the script too. And I mentioned something I also mentioned to Josh is that I'm a little mushy mouth there. I found it so interesting that in these very divisive times, let's say it as it is. It's very hard to find a balance between making one group the enemy, one group the hero. This film does an interesting job in that it kind of makes fun of all of it, which is hard to do in a way that doesn't come across as pandering or condescending or kind of a negative thing. This is fun. It makes you forget about that. Did you kind of feel that when you were kind of digging through these characters, creating your character? Did you feel that?
Yeah, I felt that, by really honing in on what these characters were with Joaquin, like the idea that everybody has different wants and needs, right? And when left to our own, devices, humans sometimes, when given the choice, make the wrong choice, just because we're all driven by different wants, and desires, and sometimes greed. And what's important to me may not be important to you, and what's important to you may not be important to Joaquin,
Mm-hmm.
and so we are driven by that. And so a social game like this, really is what it points out how we are easy to target someone for our own personal vendetta. You know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
it benefits us. And so that's what I loved about the script, was that every single one of these characters had something to gain that was important to them. No matter how ridiculous it might sound to you, it's important to them. And those are the extremes that someone's willing to go. And that's where the werewolves come out in all of us, is where our buttons are pushed. And we, each one of us, have our limits.
Yeah, I love that. I'm watching the film and I'm thinking of the title the whole time, and I'm thinking, hmm, is this what I think it is? Is this which is another plus because oftentimes a movie that comes up, it's a horror movie, it's a werewolf movie, or it's a zombie movie. You know damn well what it is. This movie kind of plays with the idea, and it's a little more. There's a little more thought, a little more cerebral than somewhere deep in the comedy is exactly what you said, Werewolves Within, the
Yeah.
title of the movie,
The
which
monster could be closer than you think. You might be searching and pointing fingers, but sometimes you might come across your reflection and realize that you've been looking at yourself the whole time.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that's where the real message lies.
That's a good message too, and it's very true. What was the most difficult moment for you? Because you have, dude, I love this character. I love what you and Cheyenne do. I think it's a lot of fun. What was the most difficult, or what was the most fun part of filming this movie?
I mean, I would say for me, the funnest part would be the rapport, just bouncing off these characters, one another, and the way they talk to each other and the quickness of it. There's scenes where we're talking to Michaela's character and it's Sam and Mills and I. And there was a scene or a take that we did that was so funny, but it was too long. And that scene needs to move quickly for the just
Uh,
the rhythm of this, the movie, but we just did a scene just for fun, and it was so funny, and I was like, this will never make it, but it's so fun, but it's so good to have that for us. Like, we had this moment where the memory will live on, and unless you were here, you had to be there, and we were.
nice. No, mention going back a little bit to Zoe's. What a cool concept. What a cool show to be involved in. What is the difference between doing something like that and doing something like Werewolves Within, or is there a difference?
Absolutely, there's a difference. Maybe not in the sense of unity, because it does take a village to make each one of these projects work. And surely
Sure.
with the musical, down to the choreography by Mandy Moore, who's incredible, and such a amazing cast, with Jane Levy at the head of that. And it's just it was a lot. It was different. It was different preparation. It was different intensity. Going to Zoe's was more of a going to dance rehearsals and vocal recordings of your song. So it was like going to musical theater camp, and every minute was accounted for. You did not waste a minute. If you weren't dancing, you were on set filming. If you weren't filming, you were recording a song. If you were recording, you were dancing. Like it was like every minute is accounted for, and you always feel like you're doing a production, because when you do a musical or a show, you put it up in a couple of weeks or maybe even months when you're in school. I remember rehearsing for like 2 months just to perform a show for 3 performances.
Yeah.
So you're like, wow, I can't believe we rehearsed all of fall and now here we are in winter. And then that's just that's part of the process, which is nice and nostalgic. But in musical theater for TV, the turnaround's much quicker. It's like you have a week to shoot this episode, and you have to learn the dances, the singing, and so it moves really quickly. And with Werewolves, it was the timing. It has, comedy is all like timing and rhythm, and every one of these, musicians were incredible with their instrument. Like they literally every one of this, orchestra member in our cast of Werewolves Within is so great with their instrument that there was not a flat note in the bunch.
I agree. I agree. Now, obviously, it's a little challenging to take genres and mix them together, like comedy and horror. But weirdly enough, they both are very similar, and they're both kind of heightened reality. Are you a horror fan? Do you get into that kind of thing?
I do. I'm also a scaredy cat when it comes to that, because I grew up with like, Mexican folklore and like the Llorona and like, Cucuy, which was like, to this day I don't know what exactly it is, if it's human, monster, alien, uh werewolf, like, so the idea that it does intrigue us, but it's also like the unknown, right? So it's the
Yeah.
unknown that kind of captivates us, and sometimes it's a thin line, because the unknown is what scares people and makes you terrified, and that's why you attack it, and you stand off from it, or you make it a target, because it's unknown, right? So horror has always been the story of outcasts, really, or you think of it like Frankenstein being chased down by the village, because you didn't understand it, you just didn't
Hmm.
know it, and you understand it. And so I think once we stop and take a breather, we realize who the real monsters are.
Wow. No, I love that you brought up La Llorona, and I butchered that. I know. But how early on were you aware of that kind of thing? Like, did your parents use it to scare you?
No, but I knew at an early age. I guess I was an old soul, because at an early age I just knew that sometimes what was different wasn't necessarily bad. It was only scary because people would put a layer on it, And
Hmm.
being, a person of color, being queer, being a person of size, all these things were all things that people would strike against you.
Yeah.
And there was the unknown. So if it's unknown, oh, they're queer, and it's like a whisper of a, or whatnot. It's not that that it's a bad thing. It's that it's made into a bad thing by the people who feel uncomfortable being educated on it. And so that's where the monsters develop. That's where X-Men, X-Men is a group of outsiders. They're mutants, but they're not. They're just different, and you are scared of that, and so you isolate them into their own category. So again, asking the question, who's the real monster?
My God, it's such a deep question too, because we're at a time when it's so easy to kind of get lost in the hyperbole of whether it's social media, whether it's whatever's going on film, whatever's going on in politics. Has it changed, like the climate changed for you, and any do you see it getting better for people of color, people in minorities? Do you think things are changing?
I think we're moving in the right direction. I think slowly but surely. We're definitely not where we were, decades ago, but that's not saying much. The idea that only decades ago there was, turmoil, and it continues to be. Maybe not in the same amount, but there was and is, and unfortunately continues to be. And until we can live, in a world where that's not even the topic of, conversation of like, how do you, it's like everyone's living their life and not living their life in fear. That is the goal.
Well, Harvey, it's about our time to wrap up, but it was an absolute pleasure. I love this movie. I loved your performance. You're a charming guy. It was absolute pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you, James. Thanks so much.
Cheers, man.
JoBlo! JoBlo!